House Stark of Winterfell is one of the great houses of Westeros, and it is the principal house in the north. They have many smaller houses sworn to them, and they have been called the Kings of Winter or the Kings of the North since before the Andal invasions. The last King of the North was Lord Torrance Stark. He was also known as the King who bent the knee, and this was because he bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror when he came over to Westeros and kind of gave up lots of his power and lots of his dignity at the same time. Now, the thing that started Torrance Stark's downfall was that he marched over to where the kind of battles were with 30,000 men, and he decided that he would try and stealthily take down the dragons, and this was a kind of plan made by his brother Brandon Snow. Snow's a name given to bastards in the north, but Brandon Snow said, stealthily take them down, you can take the dragons down. Without the dragons, the kind of invaders will be powerless. But when Brandon got there, he got more than bargained for. He saw that Aegon had 45,000 men, and also had dragons. He's like, fuck that, I ain't going after big reptiles, it's not worth it. Wasn't there? Probably paraphrasing. He didn't say that as how he probably said by the old gods and the new, I shall not go. But still, it was the same kind of thing. He didn't want to do it because there's too many people, so he got his brother Brandon and 3 maesters to go and to kind of swear fealty, which means that he kind of surrendered in a way and said that this will be my king, Aegon will be my king, and I will kind of serve under him. And when he did that, he had to give up the crown of winter, and he became the Lord of Winterfell. And although he swore fealty to Aegon and kind of lost a lot of his main power at that time, the house still stood strong and still stands strong at the time that the novels are set. Their motto is "The winter is coming," and that's one of the only mottos that isn't kind of a boast, but it's more of a warning, saying that danger's coming, winter's coming, but it also could be that White Walkers are coming in the form of winter, and maybe just winter's coming in terms of snow. Nobody knows where it's at. I think it's probably about walkers, but it's all down for kind of interpretation in a bit. I mean, it's probably about walkers, to be honest, if you know. There are walkers involved in the story. They are kind of woven in at some point. Don't know if they invade, haven't read that far, but they're definitely a part of the thing. Winterfell itself, very kind of formidable place to try and take over. Now, the Starks are a very ancient house, more so than most of the other houses. They descend from Bran the Builder, who was a legendary figure in the Age of Heroes, and he was said to have built the wall that guards people from the White Walkers and the Wildlings on the other side. So he built the wall that the Night's Watch are on. It's unsure as to whether Bran is their founder, but he's the earliest kind of Stark that people know of in the world, so it's assumed that he is the founder of the Stark house. Now, Bran didn't build the wall without help. Apparently, according to some kind of myths and legend, he was helped by giants. He also built Storm's End as well. Because he built the wall, he had a strong relationship with the Night's Watch, and it's said that he gave the Night's Watch Brandon's gift, which is 25 leagues of land, which the Night's Watch own and keep like kind of farm animals, and a lot of their kind of inventory on. The Starks are said to have came from the First Men, and many of them still follow the kind of old traditions and the old religions that the First Men would have followed. This can be seen as they have a weirwood tree in Winterfell, and you can see that Eddard Stark normally praying by it. And when Jon Snow joins the Night's Watch, he also kind of does his vow near a weirwood tree, because people know that Benjen Stark and Eddard Stark still follow the old religions. And that's why there's a saying in Westeros or in the Game of Thrones novels and TV show, when they say by the old gods and the new, that's because there's 2 different religions, the new gods and the old gods. Now, we've talked about the Children of the Forest in the earlier video if you want to go check that out, but kind of a lot of Westeros history is built around them, because they did shape a lot of the kind of main things, as they saved many of the First Men from the early invasion of the White Walkers. The Starks also had a very direct relationship with the Night's Watch, as they had killed many of the kings beyond the wall, such as Gendel Gorn, but also Bael. Now, for a very long time, House Bolton was the main antagonist, or the main kind of threat to House Stark. As you probably know, they like to flay their enemies, and their sigil is actually a man being flailed. But they still swore fealty some 1,000 years ago. Meanwhile, King Jon Stark, at the time that this was happening, was driving away pirates at the White Knife, and this is his kind of river to the north. And he also built the Wolf's Den, which is a fortress to kind of show that that event happened, but also a kind of fortification in case any more pirates, or even just enemies in general, come through that way again. Now, King John had a son called Richard Stark, and he married the Marsh King, and that meant that the Neck then had a very good relationship with the Starks, and that was a kind of diplomatic way to gain more land in the north and kind of more power over Westeros. Now, the Tarth Starks aren't the Starks in general, they're like kind of a lesser house almost. They serve under the Starks, and the reason for this is that Carlon Stark was Jon's brother. After he defeated Bolton in battle and kind of killed the Boltons when they were in one of the early revolts, he killed people who tried to kill the Starks, and because of that he was given a fortress, given a fort, and also given his own house. Although it wasn't given the Stark house, he was given a second one. Now, the Mormonts are another house that's kind of in the north, so they're under the Starks' kind of control and under their power, and the way that the Mormonts were kind of built into a house and one bare island is because it was won in the wrestling match. Kind of a weird way to win a house. Not really any glory, any battles. It was a drunken wrestling match, and that's how he won Bear Island and kind of got to glory. As you know, Commander Moment is a obvious member of House Moment, and he can't have any children. But the reason that he has kind of Jorah Moment as his, I don't know if it's his son, but it's somebody in his family. The reason Jorah Moment's in his family is because the Commander Moment joined a later age. So he'd had children beforehand. You're allowed to have children before you join the Night's Watch, but just not after or during your time in the Night's Watch. And that explains that. Now around 2:13 AL, House Stark was facing many difficulties, because many of the people who would have succession to the throne and succession to the kingship had died in the battle for Scaradrosy Island. And that's the kind of island to the north. It doesn't really have much contact with the mainland, quite far off to even get to, never mind to even kind of get people to talk to them. So they're kind of distant in terms of relationship and even physical location. But there was battles around the whole of the north, and that meant that House Stark was kind of lessered in power because of this. Now this left Baron Stark in command of Winterfell, and in command of the kind of Stark house. And he wasn't much of a commander, he was kind of just given it because everybody else is fucking died. He's like, oh well, we'll have him instead, he's the last one there, kind of thing, last resort. And he died of wounds from fighting Dagon Greyjoy, and here he finally died. And then because of that, because he died, there was lots of widows and lots of people in general fighting over who would be the next heir, which increased difficulty and tension between the Winterfell and the Stark houses and people under the Stark control in general. Now skip forward a few years and Rickard Stark is in control. Now he is the father of Eddard and Brandon Stark, who were brothers, and kind of what happened here was quite interesting indeed. You see that Brandon was betrothed to Caitlin Tully, but as you know, Caitlin Tully is married to Eddard Stark. So the reason that she had to marry Eddard Stark is as followed. So Brandon was betrothed to Caitlin Tully, but what happened is that Peter Baelish loved her more, so he challenged Brandon to a duel. And as you know, if you've read the books or you've seen the show, Peter Baelish isn't much of a warrior. So he knew he was probably going to die, but he just did it out of stupidity. And Brandon was told by Caitlin not to kill him, so he didn't. They just had a duel, and he kind of made Peter surrender, and that's exactly what happened. Meanwhile, Lyanna, Eddard and Brandon Stark's sister, was betrothed to Robert Baratheon. And she's talked about much in the show, as she died. Robert's the only person who loved her, and Robert doesn't even love Cersei, so he still thinks about Lyanna even when he's with Cersei, and it's kind of depressed him. And it's also made Eddard Stark colder than he already was because she's died, and Eddard's almost alone. If not for Caitlin, he would be by himself completely. But Rhaegar Targaryen also loved Lyanna as well, as he, after a tourney, he named her the Queen of Love and Beauty. But because she was betrothed to Robert, Rhaegar didn't like this one, but he was the king, so he thought he had any power over anybody, and he could break the kind of holy matrimony that was marriage at the time. So he kind of apparently kidnapped Lyanna. Not much is known, it's not really talked about that much, it's kind of hinted at, and it's kind of not really said directly if he kidnapped her at all, but she disappeared with Rhaegar. Now, Aegon Targaryen went over to Jon Arryn. As you know, he's killed quite early on in the series. He went over to Jon Arryn and said, give me Eddard Stark in Robert's head. He refused, and a kind of civil war broke out that would kind of change the dynamics of Westeros completely. Now during this time, Brandon died at some point, and Eddard had to kind of honour his brother's promise to wed Caitlin, and he did so, and that's what happens, and that's what leads up to the events of Game of Thrones when Eddard is betrothed and married to Caitlin Tully. And it wasn't really a marriage of love, it was merely to bind the houses, so that the Starks would have more power, and so House Tully would have more power as well. Now after the sack of King's Landing, which happened during Robert's Rebellion, about 1 year in Robert's Rebellion this happened, Eddard and 6 companions went to the Tower of Joy to retrieve Lyanna from Rhaegar's kind of company. They fought all the Kingsguard, and everyone was killed in this kind of Stark company, apart from Eddard and Howland Reed. And Eddard got in, he finally got through killing all the Kingsguard with his other person, Howland Reed, there, and found that Lyanna was there in a bed of blood and she was dying. She was 16 when she died, and she was carried back to the Stark and the crypts, the Winterfell crypts, and buried there, and that's why in the series you can see that he goes down the tombs under Winterfell, and Robert sees her tomb and kind of gets emotional and stuff, as you would. Now whilst Eddard was trying to save Lyanna, his son Robb was being born. Now, but whilst Caitlin was having a son in the north, he brought back Jon Snow from the west. 6 years later, Ned helped crush Baelon Greyjoy's rebellion, which I talked about in the Greyjoy video before, and Benjen also joined the Night's Watch, which we discussed in the Night's Watch video as well. So that's it for this week's Light Law. Hopefully you enjoyed this Stark episode, hopefully you learned something new. And in the next Light Law, remember to request any houses or any kind of history related stuff you want to see in this series. Always doing requests, I'm still going to do a few of my own things on this. There's a few more houses, a few more kind of key things I want to do. I think next week it's going to be the Doom of Valyria, because that's something that's not really talked about a lot in the series, but it's not really related to any kind of spoiler, so it's okay to talk about it. I'll see you next time, and may the Lord of Light guide you.